This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. There's a lot in here that I don't find interesting, that I don't report on. So, anyone that wants the full details, you guys can get it. So, let's jump right into it. A lot of this was going through the Vince McMahon documentary series, which a lot of this I already covered, and some of it I just don't care about. So I'll just go through the main notes. One thing I don't agree with Meltzer on, which he said on Wrestling Observer Radio today, is that he thinks it will take, if Vince gets off on all this or settles the Janelle Grant case, that it will take 10 to 15 years for the stigma to get off of Vince. So he doesn't think Vince could get back into wrestling for another 10 to 15 years. I honestly think if Vince McMahon, in my opinion, if he were to start another wrestling company or buy a wrestling company and take it over, mainstream people overall don't care about this story anymore. I haven't seen any mainstream stories on Janelle Grant for a long time. And wrestling fans, a lot of wrestling fans don't care anymore. There's some that do. I would say there's more that don't than do. And for the ones that do care, are they big enough wrestling fans that they would still watch because they're huge wrestling fans? That remains to be seen. But for now, there's no other company starting, so that's not a topic to get into. I just truly think that if Vince McMahon were to start a wrestling company tomorrow, it would have more buzz about it than AEW has right now. As far as why they didn't use The Rock or Cena much in this documentary, apparently, according to the Wrestling Observer, they both did very long interviews. They also interviewed Austin a lot, but for whatever reason, despite their star power, they didn't use much of their interviews, maybe because it didn't fit with the narratives that they wanted to portray in this documentary. Apparently, Vince had pushed for Ari Emanuel of TKO to get involved and stop the documentary from being released. Obviously, WWE, with their relationship with Netflix, the current regime, probably could have stopped it from getting released. But obviously, there's people in WWE that are against Vince McMahon, and there's some that are for them. But in the end, it was released, so they didn't care. They didn't want to fight it that much. Apparently, and this is funny, and I don't even really need to report this, but Hulk Hogan claiming that he didn't know beforehand that he was going to slam Andre the Giant, and he didn't know that whether or not Andre was going to put him over, obviously, is a load of crap. Hogan exaggerates a lot, and that's just, it works for him. I must say that Hogan interviews are interesting to watch. And exaggerating and bending the truth in interviews are, I used to get mad about it, but now I actually just realize that I watch all of Hulk Hogan's interviews, so it must work. Apparently, he also claimed he sold out Shea Stadium in 1980 with Andre the Giant in this documentary. Obviously, the main event for that one was San Martino versus Zbyszko, but the Hogan Andre was another big one on the card. It was nowhere near to being sold out. I think there was about 30,000 ish on that one. Also, one other thing, and this was the first time I've heard anyone tell the real story of this, and I believe Meltzer's version of this story. Vince claiming that if he took the role in Rocky 3, McMahon Sr. had told them he would fire him. Obviously, why would you fire someone after they appeared in one of the biggest movies of all time? And also, Meltzer points out here that by this point, Hogan was doing a lot of jobs to Andre, and he was making huge money in Japan. So it's not like he didn't have other places to work and was being pushed. He wasn't being pushed as Hulk Hogan at this point. He was still the heel Hulk Hogan, losing most of his matches to Andre. So it may have also just been a coincidence that he went to other places around that time. There was no mention of Vince's brother Rod McMahon in the documentary for whatever reason. As far as Vince putting out the stories that he used to get in a lot of fights, I don't doubt myself that Vince McMahon is a fighter. I don't doubt it myself, but Meltzer brings out that there's been no actual stories collaborating that there's ever really been a fight. Vince McMahon has ever actually been in a fight. The only one I've ever heard of, and it's in Harley Race's book, where Harley Race claiming that him and Vince got into a fight at the restaurant. And as much as I love Harley, and this was around the time that he said no to wrestling for Vince. I love Harley Race. I trained with him for 2 weeks total. I loved being around him. I love hearing the stories of him. But I don't believe the story that Harley Race and Vince McMahon got into a fight at a restaurant. Why? Because the only time it's ever come out. First of all, it would have been news if that had actually happened in a public restaurant. And other than in his book, if you watch, I even asked Harley about this in my interview with him, but you can watch any interview or Q&A he's ever had. When he's asked to tell the story about the Harley Race Vince McMahon fight, Harley Race will say, "Oh, I'd rather not talk about that. That's the past." So, anyways, that just leads me to believe that it didn't actually happen. Because again, the NWA champion getting into a fight with a WWE commentator and the head of World Wrestling Entertainment in a restaurant. I know the internet didn't exist then, but that would have been a story. But the whole point of what I was saying about this, other than Harley Racing was in a fight with Vince, there's no actual stories out there of any fights that Vince McMahon has ever been in, although I don't doubt he's been in fights here and there. The other myth that Meltzer talks about is Vince saying his father was against him expanding the territory, and he always says the father never would have sold the shares if he'd known McMahon was going to expand. But Meltzer points out here that his father actually pulled out of the NWA in 1983, where he was on the he was the director of Jim Barnett was the director of operations, and Jim Barnett went on to work for WWE. So like they were pulling out of the alliance just before Vince took over. So I mean, it's not like his father probably wasn't aware of what Vince was going to try and do. Meltzer also brought up in this that WCW was apparently only making about $8 million a year in TV rights for Nitro. And I think that might even be all of their programming on Warner Brothers Discovery. So the amount that they pay for TV rights these days is incredible. And I know we always hear the stories about WCW, how they wasted money. And I'm just going to tell you the truth. Tony Khan wastes far more money than WCW ever did. Remember the stories of like Lanny Poffo? He only worked once or twice in WCW over a 3-year contract. That it turns out that Macho Man told Bischoff to take that $150,000 a year out of his money just to hire his brother because he wanted to get Lanny a job. But apparently, from the stories I've heard, Lanny didn't keep himself in shape in that time. And when he actually had his dark matches, they didn't use him. Should they have used him more? Yes. But how many people in AEW collect paychecks for not wrestling at all? we're wrestling very little. I think AEW, more than any other company in the history of wrestling, pays people for doing little to nothing. How many people work more than once a week, 2 or 3 times a month in AEW? Not even the big stars. Mercedes Moné, it came out this week. She's the highest paid woman in wrestling. Mercedes Moné is the highest paid woman in wrestling. They don't even use her on every show. It's they don't even use her like every week, which is just crazy. But I don't want to digress too much. Um, the other thing he brought up was Pritchard said the day after Austin did the Austin 316 promo, everyone says that the next day at Raw there were signs everywhere with Austin 316 written on it. Meltzer says you can go back and watch Raw the next day and you won't find any signs with Austin 316. Eventually, as he kept saying Austin 316, it caught on. Obviously, it was one of the biggest shirts ever in wrestling. I even had it. But saying it was an overnight thing is a myth. So that's all. He went in a lot more detail of the Vince stuff, but I'll be honest, I'm sick of hearing about Vince at this point. Vince Russo, by the way, John Paz sent me a new podcast of Vince Russo that I posted today where he gives his opinion of the McMahon documentary. And by the way, I am supposed to interview the Sandman tonight. I did Ken Patera a couple days ago, and I am interviewing the Warlord on Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Let me continue on here. WWE's Bad Blood show in Atlanta has a good pre-sale, over 13,000 right now. Overall, WWE tickets, whereas like for a while, most of their TV tapings were doing over 10,000. There's more and more under 10,000. So obviously ratings are going down, attendance is going down. However, towards the end of the year and into the new year, when they start on Netflix, you're going to have Cena coming back and The Rock. So obviously, even though interest is dropping right now, they're going to get a boost sooner than later. Artem Chinovtsev, Nikki Garcia Bella's husband, the prosecution dropped the domestic violence charges against him. It did came out in the police report that she was actually reportedly, he was the one that actually called the police, saying that she was throwing stuff at him and stuff. So who knows? And I've heard her say that she's looking to get a divorce. I'll be honest, I don't really care. Apparently, she was also with Dolph Ziggler and John Cena. Apparently, the NWA is going to be off the CW app next week with NXT going on to the network. Remember, I like Billy Corgan as a singer. I'm not impressed with the NWA's product. I wish them the best because I like some people involved with that company, obviously, such as Rodney Mack, Jazz, and Tom Pritchard. But remember the big deal they made that they were going to get on network television, and how for months and months and months we heard that this was going to be the turnaround for NWA, blah, 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 blah. In the end, they end up on an app. And since they've been on the app, people completely stopped talking about the product. So back when they were on YouTube, at least it was more, what's better? And I don't know how much they were being paid for the app or if they were just on there for free or whatever. But in my opinion, what's better, being on YouTube where everyone in the world can watch your show, which by the way, I have more YouTube subscribers than NWA, which tells you something about their popularity. I'm just an average guy, not a millionaire rock star. I still work a regular job. So I'm not bragging about that, but in theory, with all their money and resources, they should have more subscribers and views than me. Last time I checked, anyways. But anyways, what was I going to say? To me, you're better off on a platform where everyone can watch you, because maybe EC3 is not the best champion either. I have no issues with the guy. I've met him at a TNA show. He seems nice. But Tyrus, as much as people didn't like his wrestling, he was at least giving the company buzz, appearing on that Fox show, holding the title. And people, with the amount of people that didn't like Tyrus as the champion, there was always a lot of talk. Whereas EC3, it just seems people stopped talking about NWA. As far as the wrongful death lawsuit filed by Jerry Lawler related to his son committing suicide in jail, he was asking for $3 million in damages. Apparently, that was thrown out. I was falsely in prison for 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks, and I was completely exonerated. Man, that was a terrible experience. I could understand why someone would commit suicide in jail. It's not fun in jail, especially if you're in there for a long period of time and you're in a situation like Brian Lawler. Apparently, SmackDown, it's pretty certain they're going to 3 hours in January when they move to Netflix internationally. Apparently, WrestleMania tickets this year are going for as high as $50,000. Now, to put that into perspective, we're WrestleMania 41 now. In 1985, which was a while ago, front row tickets at WrestleMania were $100. 20 years later, in 2004, front row tickets were $1,000. By WrestleMania 30, they were 2,500. And now somehow they've jumped to 50 grand. My God. That's just crazy. Apparently, it's about $35,000, and as low as $27,000 for third row. I guess if you're rich, you don't care about that. Like 20, I'm sure to some people 27,000 is a drop in the bucket, but I would never be able to pay that much. Like I wouldn't even want to. As far as SmackDown last week, September 20th in Sacramento, they did 13,700. Very good crowd. Raw in Ontario, California this Monday was 8,600. AEW advances are not good right now overall. Some are under 1,000. Their Grand Slam show at Arthur Ashe Stadium only did a 0.23 rating, which is good for AEW, but they put a lot of work into trying to promote that show. Their Wrestle Dream in Tacoma show coming up October 12th, that's their next pay-per-view, now has ticket deals to try and get more people in there. There's only 5,100 tickets out altogether. Swerve Strickland is saying AEW is going to be on Fox soon. Could be FS1. This would be another show, potentially Shockwave. I mean, the money that they would get from another show, that would be great, but it seems to me like the last thing AEW needs is another show. Tony Khan has like at least 3 jobs with AEW, the soccer team, the football team. Rampage and Collision, let's face it, they suck right now. What's going to happen when you get a 4th show? Like, first of all, Rampage and Collision are going to go down even more because they already seem to not give a crap about them. But like, is there really a big demand for another show? Apparently, Malachi Black's contract is expiring soon. He's expected to go to WWE. Penta wrestled last Sunday at the Lucha Festival in Mexico. He was scheduled and advertised for the Collision last Saturday in Springfield, as were Moxley, Thunder Rosa, and Orange Cassidy. They were all on a giant billboard outside the arena, but none of them were on the show. Jake Paul is saying that UFC should raise their minimum fighter pay from $12,500 to $50,000. There's no question UFC fighters don't get paid very much, but they don't really have any competition. Sam says he saw the whole documentary. I haven't heard a lot of good things about the documentary other than it's mostly stuff that's already been talked about. HEF Media says McMahon's face looks like it's been punched by hands of Stone Ronnie Garvin, but he'd be dead if that happened. Lots of good clips of Jimmy Garvin on the channel lately, by the way. Someone says if Vince got back into wrestling, he's not going to be able to make a deal. WA, not sure what you mean by that, but I hate. I wouldn't say I hate, but I don't find any of the companies entertaining right now at all. I really don't. I'd rather watch a Hulk Hogan interview like I watched one of his latest ones this week, where I know he's going to just talk bullshit, than watch anything of modern wrestling. Yeah, Sandman will be good. It's supposed to do tonight around 6 o'clock. Looking forward to that. Honky Tonk Man, he's back under WWE Legends contract, and he doesn't want to rock the boat. So that's why he doesn't do interviews right now. Martel did very well for himself financially and doesn't want to do anything in wrestling right now. Yes, the Mike Tyson fight is coming up. I've been watching him do some interviews about it. It's going to be the biggest fight of the year. And definitely. 100%. Anyways, guys, have a great afternoon. I'll probably be back later tonight with more news. And again, supposed to have a Sandman interview tonight and a Warlord interview on